Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Hey there, welcome back, Talent Growers. I'm really glad that you're here to listen to another episode of the TalentGrow Show. I am Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at TalentGrow. And today's a solo episode where I'm going to teach you 4 science-backed techniques for controlling your emotions during those critical conversations and negotiations where definitely being out of control is not in your interest. But before we dive into the episode, I just wanted to share with you very quickly a recent review that the show received on Apple Podcasts, formerly known as iTunes. And this review is titled, Extraordinary Work, comes from ASRMD. And it says, Halelly, I love your podcast. You have this capability of explaining complex and tedious models into simple, actionable, and fun to listen tips. I feel so thankful to have this content online, and I hope everyone else out there could benefit from your podcast, but also from your great work. Thank you so much, ASR. I appreciate you. I love this review, and I love all of the reviews that I receive. So I really hope that you will take a little bit of time to leave a short review on Apple Podcasts. It's really easy, but it adds so much value to me and to potential listeners. So think about that. I hope you'll go into Apple Podcasts. I have a tutorial on my website that shows exactly how to do it. And thank you so much in advance. Of course, I'll be happy to read it on one of the future episodes of the TalentGrow Show, which I send to you for free every single week. So thank you. Without further ado, let's get into this episode, a solo episode of the TalentGrow Show. I was just working with several groups of emerging leaders in Atlanta for one of my clients, and I was coaching them on the art of critical conversations, how to guide those conversations successfully. And one of the learners shared a story about how she recently went into an executive's office who was in charge of her group, and she was talking to this executive about her desire to transition into a different project than the one that she was currently on. And she said that she got a little bit of pushback from the executive and that she burst into tears. She started crying. And so she asked me, how could she have prevented that from happening, or how can she prevent this from recurring in the future, this kind of an emotional outburst? So that was definitely part of the work that I did during that workshop. I taught the group some emotional regulation techniques. And at the end of the full day workshop, this learner thanked me for the insights, and she thought that it was definitely something she could do. And another one of them came up and asked me if I already had a podcast episode about this topic, since I seemed so knowledgeable about it. Well, I didn't. So he encouraged me to create one. You ask, you shall receive. Then a week later, I was working in DC, in the DC suburbs actually, with a different client. And in this case, I was doing a workshop on how to negotiate with more confidence with another group of leaders. And a similar question came up. How do I manage my own emotions when I am in a negotiation and there's a lot riding on the line? So this is actually a very common challenge for most humans in both professional and personal conversations, where the stakes are high, you have a lot of skin in the game and a vested interest in the outcomes. And a lot of times these kinds of conversations involve some kind of a conflict or differing perspectives. So it is something that is hard to manage, and a lot of us feel very challenged. I've addressed this in a previous blog post titled 3 research-based tricks to help control emotions during critical conversations. But given that specific request, and given how challenging this is for so many, I thought that I'd create this episode and expand on and add to what I've written. This is very practical advice based on research from the world of neuroscience and cognitive science, and it can really help you regulate your emotions and keep them under control or regain your control during these very important and highly charged types of conversations. Are you ready? Let's get to it. Now, the key to not reacting emotionally in critical conversations is actually, first you need to learn to become more aware of your emotional state and notice your emotions sooner than noticing only once they've brewed over for a while. then it can be much more manageable. You can become much more successful at regulating your emotions and staying in control or regaining control. So that's one of the first things I wanted to talk about. How aware of your emotions when they are just beginning to brew? A lot of people are not that aware. They only notice the emotion once it's kind of out of control. And so you can develop your ability to learn and notice the signs, the signals that your body gives you. Your emotions are signals from your limbic system in your brain that is designed to alert you of potential threats and rewards. I've described this process in much more detail in a video that I created, a vlog that is titled, Can You Leave Your Emotions at the Door? I linked to it in the show notes. But the answer is no, you cannot leave your emotions at the door. And so you need to recognize that your emotions actually happen first. And rational thinking happens only after you experience emotions, and not even necessarily. Sometimes you become so wrapped up in your emotions that you don't have a chance to get into your rational mode. And in another blog post that I've written, I describe how to harness the power of your emotional intelligence, where I talk about how you can learn to notice what emotions you're experiencing, and ideally learn to notice them when they're still in what I call baby emotion mode, very low intensity versions of that emotion. So for example, angry, when it's very intense, you feel enraged or livid or full on rage, but it doesn't start there. It usually starts to bubble up and you feel kind of irked or annoyed or peeved or frustrated. And you'll have a much better chance of being able to manage that emotion when it's still in that very low intensity mode than when it's in full on rage. Your body actually gives you signs, and so you need to learn to listen to them. What might be some of those signs? Everybody's different. Each of us will experience these signs differently. So you need to pay close attention to your own body. But signs might include things like an increased heart rate, or your breath starts to quicken, or maybe you'll feel flushed, or you'll feel hot in your ears or in your face or in your neck. Some people feel a tightening in their jaw, or kind of a knot in their chest or in the pit of their stomach. The more aware you are of your personal signs, and the more you're able to read them when they first show on the scene, the better you will have the ability to stay in control or regain control with the emotional regulation techniques that I want to share with you today. Make sense? Because if you're feeling livid, those techniques are probably not going to work that well for you. But if you're feeling annoyed, they'll work. So what are some of your signs? I'd love to hear about those in the comments section of this podcast episode. So today I wanted to share with you 4 strategies, techniques, hacks, whatever you want to call them, that will help you regulate your emotions during critical conversations. Again, with the assumption that you're going to also develop the ability to notice those emotions sooner rather than later. So the 4 techniques or the 4 strategies are: take a breath or take a break, the technique of labeling your emotions. A third technique I'll describe is reframing. And the fourth is how to be present and mindful as an emotional regulation approach. So let's dive into each of these with a bit more detail. Ready? So the first one, take a breath or take a break. So when you feel those early bird signs of your emotional reaction, and you think that emotional reaction is not going to help you along in this conversation, so it's not a positive emotion or a helpful emotion, so maybe it's anger or fear or disgust, then sometimes just taking some deep breaths can help your body stay calm or regain its calm. Sometimes you need a little bit more time, so it's perfectly acceptable in many situations to request a short break. Even a 5-minute break can help you get enough distance from the situation and get back to neutral so you can stay in control of your emotions. But if your emotions have become quite intense, it might mean that you need to take a longer break. 5 minutes won't cut it. So you can say something like, hey, Joe, this is a really important conversation for us. So I would like to ask if we can pick it back up tomorrow morning. You don't have to get into too much detail and explain that you're feeling out of control or your emotions have the best of you. Although if you have trust with the person, you could do that. But you can still take the break and come back to the conversation after you've been able to cool down. So this first technique is take a breath or take a break. The second technique is to label your emotions. So there are some amazing insights coming out from research, especially in neuroscience and cognitive science, that say that simply putting your feelings into words can help you reduce their intensity. This is mind-blowing to me. The act of searching and finding the right word to identify an emotional sensation actually engages your brain's braking system and helps to dampen the limbic system, which is the emotional reaction center in your brain. So as we experience a negative emotional reaction while preparing for a critical conversation, we could say the name of the emotion we're feeling and actually causes it to cool down. And if you experience a strong emotion during the conversation, then you have two options with regard to labeling. Either we could label the emotion to ourselves internally in our head if we don't want to say it out loud. Or if you think it's appropriate for the context and the person, you could choose to actually name the emotion out loud and bring it into the conversation. For example, we might say, Mary, I'm feeling frustrated that you've submitted your report late the last 3 times because it's caused me to be late with my part of the report too. See, I said that I'm feeling frustrated, and that's not a very highly intense emotion. It's one of those a lower range baby emotion versions that is okay to speak about. So we are actually going to experience a reduction in the intensity of the emotion as a result of naming it. Isn't that amazing? So that's the second technique, labeling. The third technique is reappraisal or reframing, finding a different and more positive perspective to describe the situation. Reappraisal also activates the brain's braking system that we talked about earlier. But wait, there's more. Studies show that reappraising can actually cause us to have more positive emotions and less negative emotions overall. And it actually causes people to report having a generally higher level of well-being. This is amazing. So a great method for reappraising our emotions was introduced by Dr. Marty Seligman. He is the father of positive psychology. And this method is called the ABCDE method. I found a great article that describes it. I'll link to it in the show notes. But in short, the ABCDE method stands for adversity, beliefs, consequences, dispute, energy. And the best approach is to do this in a written way. Write this down. So let's do it quickly. Adversity just means what's the bad situation? What's the problem? Who, what, when, where, all of the details about the situation. Beliefs, that's the B, means that you describe your internal narrator and what it's saying to you during that situation as verbatim as possible. C stands for consequences, which means you write down what are the consequences of those beliefs? What did you feel and do? And be as specific as possible with the emotions that you felt and your reactions. Now, the D stands for dispute those beliefs. You need to write down the ways you were wrong to have those beliefs. Use evidence if you can, and think of specific examples of alternative ways that you could have explained the same situation from a more positive or maybe more accurate vantage point. So you're disputing those beliefs. So for example, if your belief was that this person was out to get you, you could dispute that and say, well, they weren't really out to get me. They just saw it from a different perspective. And once I listened to them, I could see how they saw it. I could understand where they were coming from. And finally, the E stands for energy. And you write down how your energy might have changed as a result of disputing your thinking. Did your mood shift? Did you change your behavior? What changed in your energy? So that's ABCDE. Anyway, I hope that you will try this one way of reappraising or reframing your thinking into a more positive way. Sometimes that helps you come out of a negative emotion and become able to shift into a more positive emotion during your conversation, or sometimes during that break that you're taking. And finally, the fourth technique that I want to share with you for regulating your emotions during critical conversations is being more present. And I've written and podcasted about the growing evidence that there is importance to the skill of mindfulness. All the way back in episode 1, we had an episode about this, being fully present and in the moment. We can take advantage of this helpful practice to reduce our emotional reaction to our own emotions during critical conversations. We all have this internal narrator, a part of our brain that's telling us what's happening and what it means. And usually this narrator is focused on getting stuck in the past or kind of in the future, catastrophizing things or blowing them out of proportion. So if we can turn off this narrator and just be present in the moment when we experience a negative emotional reaction, then we can become more able to get some real-time data to improve our ability to make good decisions, to rationally interpret the situation. By being more mindful and more present, we increase both our awareness of external and internal data. In other words, we get more data about our own mental state, but we can also pick up more information about our conversation partner and other things that can help us make smarter choices about what action to take and have quicker access to using some of the other emotional regulation techniques that I've discussed. We even free ourselves up to even become more empathetic to the other person in the situation. And we might be able to see things from their perspective, which is something that can help us get new insights about the situation and will definitely help us connect better with them because they'll experience that we are showing or experiencing empathy. I hope you try it. These are 4 emotional regulation techniques that come from the world of science and that should be able to help you stay in control of your emotions or regain control of your emotions during those critical conversations. All right, talent growers, there's a ton more information out there now about this topic of emotional regulation, and more studies are being published all the time. But I thought that these 4 actionable methods can help you feel much more in control during those difficult but critically important conversations that you know you're going to experience again and again in both your professional and your personal life, including negotiations. And you'll be more able to get the results that you desire while keeping your relationship trust intact. So now, what do you think of this approach? Are you going to give it a try? And if you've already tried it, will you come back and tell us the results, what you've experienced? I'd love to hear from you. Comment in the comment section of the show notes page, which is always at talentgrow.com. You can also leave me a voicemail message. And of course, you can reach me in many other ways, like emailing me or reaching out via social media. I'd love to hear from you. And share this episode if you found it valuable. A lot of people have this kind of a challenge and are not sure how to deal with it. So let's help more people together, shall we? And of course, you can ask me a question or tell me a topic that you would like me to cover in a future solo episode of the show. I make this podcast for you, so don't be shy. Hey, thanks for listening. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your interest, and I hope that this helps you. I am Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at TalentGrow. This has been another episode of the TalentGrow Show. Until the next time, I hope you make today great.
Thanks for listening to the TalentGrow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.